Strangford Lough Yacht Club once again brought us the season-ending Frosties series. Stick around as the team of bottom-up boats dissects the key moments across the 8 races held over 4 weekends. With 10 entries and 7 boats regularly lining up on the start line, the racing was closer than ever before. The conditions ranged from 2 to 22 knots, with some races completed in bright sunshine and others under stormy clouds. Race 1 got underway in 6 knots from the west-northwest, with a up and down course between J and C, with 2 laps, Mark K acting as a clearance mark on the first round. A sign of what was to come in many of the following races, HiJacker engaged GTR, trying to get the hook and controlling position before the start. GTR managed to break the overlap, getting some clear air, before tacking and heading out to the starboard late line with MoviStar Blue. MoviStar Blue puts in their tack to approach the top mark. GTR hangs on to try and get in a lee bow position. As they approached the starboard lay line, the breeze shifted to the right, which allowed the boats out on the left-hand side to lead at the first mark. HiJacker first around, closely followed by La Basquière. MoviStar Blue managed to get the overlap and Boy Room, rounding in third, closely followed by GTR as they head off to Mark K, the clearance mark. The defining moment of the race came on the rundown to C as the breeze died off. GTR thought that the next puff would come back from the west, so jibed over, hopefully to get to the new breeze first. The skipper on Flint took a split second too long to react and start their roundup, causing their spinnaker to brush the stern of GTR. This resulted in them having to do penalty turns. GTR's fate was sealed when the breeze didn't fill in from the west as their skipper had expected. Instead, it went round to the east, pivoting in a clockwise direction, which gave the advantage to HiJacker and Lion, who had stood out on the left-hand side of the Ramon. This enabled them to get round Mark C with their spinnakers up before the breeze went to the east, causing the others to work up to Mark C, punching into the tide. The breeze eventually filled in from the east, allowing the boats to run down and complete a shortened 1-lap course. HiJacker and Lion were long gone, with HiJacker completing a comprehensive win by over 3 minutes on both the laps and corrected time. With the shortened race 1 taking so long to complete, it seemed unlikely we would get a second race in, but the breeze filled in from the southeast at 6 to 8 knots, allowing the race officer to set a sprint course, starting at O, rounding C, running down to L before beating back up to the finish at O. The decisive moment in this race came in the starting sequence, with the breeze shifting to the right. This would usually result in the committee end being favoured. But as you could fetch the first mark from anywhere on the line, the crucial factor was clear air and speed on the line. GTR set up below the fleet with more speed, allowing them to punch out ahead in clear air as they powered off to the first mark. From there, it was just up to the crew to work together and execute one of nearly every maneuver you could think of. As they got to the top mark, 1 bear away and 1 jibe, followed by 1 spinnaker set. And then as they approached the bottom mark, it was 1 drop, 1 roundup, and the only tack of the race before shooting the boat to windward to point the bow across the finish line. The results are a great example of how evenly matched everyone is on the IRC system. GTR taking the race win, but the first 5 boats all finishing in 1 minute and 7 seconds of the leader. Week 2 of the regatta brought races 3 and 4 that were sailed in very different conditions, with 12 to 28 knots blowing in from the south-southeast. Both races were completed on a trapezoidal course, starting at O, up to E, across to D, a long run down to M, a reach across to L, and then back up through O, completing 2 laps to finish the course. The wind and waves at their peak before the start of the race, several of the crews, including What's the Rush and Lion, decided to set up with a reef in their mainsail. With the extra control from the running backstays, Team GTR decided to tough it out, flattening their new North 3DI mainsail, powering up the first 2 legs to get a good 30-second lead as they rounded the second mark and popped the kite. What's the Rush 2 led the trailing pack as 4 boats fought for clear air as they came in to the clearance mark at the top of the trapezoid, setting their chutes for the long run down to M. A lightning fast set by the crew on GTR enabled them to get up to top speed quickly, getting a big enough lead to break any possible wind shadow created by the trailing pack. This helped them all the way down the run as the others fought for clear air. Team GTR led from start to finish in both races, with the crew working extremely hard in difficult conditions, executing countless flawless maneuvers to enable them to slowly eke out a big enough lead to take both line honours and the corrected time win in both races 3 and 4. Sadly, we didn't have any footage of the other strong performer on day 2. Flint, the lowest handicap boat in IRC1, scored a 2nd in race 3 and a 3rd in race 4, to be only 2.5 points behind GTR, who leads the regatta on 8 points after 4 races. Week 3 of the regatta brought some champagne sailing conditions, with 10 to 14 knots coming out of the west for the start of race 5. The course consisted of 2 loops, starting at O, up to J, around the clearance mark at K, around 3, and back up to O, with a shorter second lap consisting of a JC loop before finishing off O. HiJacker and GTR were at it again, fighting for control at the start, each trying to get the hook on each other, with a similar battle going on in the background between What's the Rush and Lion. It was also great to see the newest boat in IRC1, Atalanta, getting involved and pushing hard at the start. After 3 or 4 zigzags, both GTR and HiJacker had got too far away from the favoured pin end of the line. HiJacker jammed it up to windward to kill some time before the start, allowing GTR to loop around and get the controlling hook position. While all of this was going on, a similar battle happened up to windward, but they had enough gap to pull away and hit the line at speed. But the start went to La Basquière, who came in from port tack, tacking around with speed and hitting the line to get the advantage as the race got underway. As GTR put their bow down to gain speed, they had a controlling lee bow position, casting a wind shadow over HiJacker, but they were being affected by La Basquière, who had won the start. After getting up to top speed, GTR decided to look for a shift out on the right-hand side of the course, tacking across to port and ducking the sterns of both Lion and Flint who had got better starts up at the favoured pin end of the line. As the boats converged on the starboard ley line, GTR had managed to get up into second place. Flint was doing a fantastic job hanging in there with the big boys, well ahead on corrected time after the first beat of the race. Lion came in from the left-hand side of the beat, tacking on top of GTR, consolidating her lead as they head in to the first mark. The battle only intensified as they turned and head down the first run, with the trimmers on GTR working hard to try and get forward and to leeward of Lion, who continued to lead. A little over halfway down the run, the breeze shifted 15 degrees around to the south, turning it into a reach and giving the advantage back to Lion, who could rumble down over the top of GTR, taking their wind. As GTR and Lion continued their close quarters battle, it allowed HiJacker to bring the increased pressure down, joining the party and also going over the top of GTR as the boats race towards Mark III. With little to no chance to getting buoy room, GTR decided to soak low, trying to give them options as they approached Mark III. An early drop and taking a wide berth turned out to be the decisive moment in the race. With HiJacker pinned on the outside of Lion, having to give buoy room, and with Lion struggling to get set up for the roundup, GTR managed to create enough room to whip up inside the both of them, getting their sails trimmed on and up to windward, allowing them to get a key step up on both the leading boats. This enabled GTR to tack across onto port tack, which was the lifted leg after the 10-degree shift that they'd seen down the run. GTR sailed a faultless race from then on, hitting all of the shifts to extend at each mark, taking both the elapsed and corrected time victory. The team on Flint continued their consistent performance, taking another second place. Race 6 was the second race to be held on Regatta Day 3, this time with 11 to 15 knots coming out of the northwest. Starting at O, up to G, around the clearance mark at H, down to M before finishing back up to O. It was originally scheduled for 2 rounds, but was shortened to 1. It was once again all go at the start. This time, HiJacker looking to get a safe leeward and control GTR. GTR managed to keep up its speed and planned a quick tack in front of the other boats to line up for the line. Sadly, this is when it all went wrong, with the tiller lifting up and getting caught in the main sheet. By the time the crew could get it cleared, they'd wrecked their time and distance, being too far away from the line before they got moving. HiJacker set up to leeward, hitting the line with speed, and never looked back, distancing from the rest of the fleet at every mark. Things went from bad to worse for GTR on the way to the finish, as their outhaul broke, turning their mainsail into a massive bag. The team recovered quickly, using the reefing line as a temporary outhaul, but how costly would it be? HiJacker cleared away to win by over 2 minutes, but there was only 25 seconds between second and fifth. How many places did this cost GTR, and would it affect the overall? For races 7 and 8 on Regatta Day 4, the fleet was given a perfect 12 to 15 knots, from the north. The course was set for 2 rounds, the first going M, A, E, G, O, with the second lap the same, just taking away the clearance mark A. Coming into race 7, GTR was 1.5 points ahead of Flint on 14, with HiJacker still a mathematical chance if they had 2 good races. The start would once again prove critical in today's race, with the committee end of the line on Transnet heavily favoured and the tide out. It was going to be a game of chicken to see who could approach from port tack, flipping over onto starboard to try and get the favoured windward end of the line. GTR managed to thread the needle, missing Flint, who was on starboard, and keeping clear of What's the Rush, watching the depth and going as close as they dare before flipping across onto starboard tack. With What's the Rush, their closest competitor, clear astern, and the rest of the fleet locked in a tight tacking duel, it enabled GTR to sail their own race, picking the shifts up the first beat and slowly building on their lead to take both line honours and corrected time. With Flint running into difficulties at the Spinnaker drop on the first round, they ended up in 5th place, which proved to be their discard. With this result, GTR only needed a consistent performance, staying out of trouble in race 8 and not finishing last to take the title. With the conditions identical to those of race 7, with 12 to 15 knots out of the north, the committee decided to end the regatta with a sprint course which was equal to the second loop of the first race, starting at O, up to M, round E, then G, and up to O to finish. Taking into consideration that they only needed a steady result to take the title, GTR lined up for a conservative start in the middle of the line, ensuring that they hit the line with speed and clear air. The first beat turned into a drag race out to the port ley line for HiJacker and GTR, the critical moment being who would pick the best ley line into Mark End. After completing their tack, GTR was confident that they could lay Mark End and had HiJacker sitting safely off their windward hip. GTR almost threw away the title as they approached a close cross with Lion, who was coming in on starboard. The skipper asked for a main sheet ease, but the cleat was stuck. Quickly reacting, he threw the boat into attack to avoid the collision. As the crew on GTR struggled to get back under control, this allowed HiJacker to slip past both GTR and Lion, heading out to the starboard ley line. Things back under control, GTR put in their tack to approach the top mark just before Lion did, which turned out to be the right decision, jumping them back up into second place. HiJacker led by less than 2 boat lengths at Mark End, courtesy of a couple of less tacks at the top end of the beat. The crew on GTR wanted to make amends for their false tack, and they did so with a lightning fast spinnaker set that allowed them to roll over the top of HiJacker while getting a couple of boat lengths clear of Lion, who took considerably longer to set their chute. The close racing down the first run was thirsty work. JW stopped for a quick drink of water while John Fleming did his best impression of walking on water. Going into the bottom mark, GTR had managed to eke out a couple more boat lengths lead, but it was still all to play for as they rounded the bottom mark and headed off on the last reach and then worked to the finish. After rounding the bottom mark, GTR decided to throw an attack in an effort to sail the longest leg of the beat first, while Lion continued on up the western shore, looking for an advantage to try and close the gap and take line honours in the final race. After several more tacks and with the finish line in sight, the two boats had closed, GTR choosing at the last minute to duck Lion, thinking that the committee end of the line was favoured. Lion stood on and hit the pin end of the line, taking line honours by 2 seconds. Corrected times once again showed how evenly matched the top boats were, with GTR taking first place by 5 seconds and only 37 seconds separating the top 6, with a tie for 5th place. After a flawless final day, GTR took first place in the 2019 Frosty Series. The result not looking as close as what the racing showed. Flint, while not having a great final day, proved that consistency pays with a strong second place. HiJacker taking third from a fast finishing Lion with their 2 second places finishes on the final day. So that concludes Bottom Up Boats review of the IRC 1 2019 Frosty Series. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe to get all the latest action as soon as it's released, giving us a thumbs up along the way.